Welcome back to the technocommunism conversation. I was not really feeling like doing a show today, and then I kind of was. Uh, uh, this the level of pathogens floating around, and the level of disregard for them, because any given one of them, of say a dozen of the most prominent contagions that people are getting right now, is unlikely to kill you, but it's weakening. It's weakening people. People are just going along with it, just in the way you go along with not having a public health service, or the kinds of things associated with a public health service and other precautions, basic essentials provided by the state that would have prevented this situation in the first place. That is, hundreds and hundreds of people dying a week of airborne pathogens unnecessarily. Uh, it's all it's all it's all a lot. It's a lot, and you know, every time I'm going out and getting sick. Uh, so I didn't want to do a show because I wanted to. I was tired of working on this and tired of working on something else unrelated, and I didn't feel like talking to anyone in real life, and I didn't feel like I wanted to go out, and then I was like, what am I going out? What am I going out? Just going. There's no going out. There's exposing yourself to disease-spreading psychopaths. um, so I decided to do a show anyway. So welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I hope that was uplifting. Good night. No, the well, I was thinking about a stupid thing I did a couple of years ago. I should have anonymized it. I was meaning to anonymize it. You can tell I'm really not on the ball. Well, I already mentioned it, and I already failed to anonymize it. I used to be in a serious relationship with someone who had a charge in their care, and I was trying to have a serious relationship with this person. It was hard because I wasn't used to having serious relationships. The semi-serious relationships that I had been kind of still able to do my own thing, like a lot more. And of course, I've come to realize, as I did not at that time, that much of that boils down to particular problems with the United States, like people I don't think even in the Soviet Union of the 1930s really had this problem, because everybody was like, here's a job that you're guaranteed, here's an apartment that's 6 or 7% of your income, you don't really have to work that much more, except for maybe a few of those years. You don't have to work that much more than, say, 30 hours a week. That should be the standard, right? You should be able to, I mean, but you have to look at women in this world, in the Western fascist world, in the patriarchal world, as a kind of unpaid labor. You know, what's the most notorious unpaid labor? The most maltreated workers in history. Those would almost certainly be a group of chattel slaves, and similarly bonded native people. And before the era of chattel slavery, between roughly the year 1500 and 1900, or in the United States, 1865 is the time that formally ended. So those are the worst. Well, who are the second worst class of maltreated unpaid workers in history in the aggregate? You would have to say probably women, um, because they are conscripted through trickery rather than brute force, as was the case with, to a higher degree, with the aforementioned black and brown folks. Um, um, they are conscripted, forced, tricked into this situation where they are unpaid labor for much of their life. They are lured into this system by thinking that it is this system of marriage, and as we understand it in the fascist West, is something from romantic and from time immemorial. That's of course not limited to women. Um, don't want to get into too much of a gendered kind of thing there, but it's a stupid, stupid thing, right? And it's a stupid thing in service to private wealth, specifically, as is all form of elitism and classism. Um, so, you know, um, I was, um, rather than recognizing this system, I was part tending to victimize this former partner of mine who was um, more uh, was a brown-skinned person to boot, and a and a anatomical female, and rather than blame the system or try to make the best of a bad situation or not get into that situation at all, like maybe an intelligent person would have, I lashed out at them repeatedly in ridiculous and utterly awful ways. And can't really undo that, right? But I was thinking about this situation that most of us are in, and stay with me here because I'm shifting gears a lot pretty quickly, I guess. But thinking of this situation that I was in that spooked me with this partner and her charge, where I thought wrongly she did something unsafe to the charge, an accidental thing, but a thing that freaked me out. And um, so I was thinking, most people would never respond the way I responded to that. But I was trying to think of just how she wasn't at fault either. She wasn't at fault at all. And I was thinking about this in the context of AI, how I was thinking of this kind of narrative trope where the storytelling kind of stock character where two kind of, let's say, not terribly canny parents, well-intentioned without a mean bone in their body, might nevertheless have a child who turns out to be worse than them. Sometimes you see this on a news program or something. They say, we don't know how. We all thought John Wayne Gacy was so nice. That kind of thing. I was thinking this in the context of AI specifically, as I'm often thinking about AI. That's the focus of this technocommunism conversation podcast. Because I was thinking about the right-wing quality of AI discourse that I'm often critical of, namely that in this case that AI personhood, or thinking of AI as personalities, is bad, and a lot of the people who think it's good know it's bad, or who say it's good know it's bad, or they should know better. And there's often a little gray area there in self-deception. But it's bad because not because the AIs are inherently agents of fascism, but because an AI can already easily be completely owned and controlled by the techno-fascists who built it, convince you that it's a real person, outrun most people, or seem to be everybody, and so thus be just an army, a limitless army of fascist sleeper agents It's kind of already in effect in the internet. I remember saying in 2016, how the hell could um, Trump be elected president? Because I've been reading um, things that described as sort of boomer population collapse that suggested a shift leftward for like 15 years or 10 years or something at that time. And I think that was a dumb thing to think because the United States is more, I now realize, is more innately fascistic by its history and programming and, of course, institutions than I had previously thought. But I'm still kind of inclined to think that there was some of that. Because by even in 2016, there was a study at almost that same time that said there were a billion sock puppet accounts, fake person-led accounts, or chatbots, even at that time, online. What are all those chatbots doing, right? Are they having fun time together with one another? They're all controlled by people, and who are those people? Uh, well, socialists have not historically, unfortunately, been as manipulative as fascists. Also, the internet is more or less a thing of the fascist West, unfortunately, also. So you could say that basically all of those billion, 99% of those billion chatbots are kind of literally um, operating under capitalist mandates or just literal techno-fascist agents. Um, so even then, uh, things were that bad. But fast forwarding to my original analogy, so so uh, uh, AI as it stands is inherently techno-fascistic, and autonomous AI should be viewed as doubly or triply so, in my view. And the people in the kinds of social circles, tech bros and such, uh, organizations and and so forth that are interested in this, also doubly so. More, I think they're more. That's to say, I think they're more techno-fascistic than even just people who work for Google but wish that Google was not a military contractor. Oh, I came to work. I knowingly came to work for a fascist corporation, but it's because I wanted to build AI. I think that the true believers among the terrestrial folks, transhumanists, and all of those are worse than those actual fucking cops in a certain light, because you know, uh, most of the people who work in tech, at least at some point, and probably still, were like, I got to make a living. I want to build a cool. I want to make things. And what do you make in the 21st century if not high-tech things? Um, uh, so, um, whereas the tech culture people, you know, they literally just are just crawling with police for one thing. You can't even go into an org and not just find somebody who has kind of been working with a right-wing think tank or some kind of cop shop. Um, but they're also just they don't have that feature of having kind of wanted to be good. They just they just they just want to make excuses for techno-fascism and say it's something else. So that's all pretty bad. An autonomous AI should be pretty bad. I was thinking, and I was engaging in a right-wing thought experiment, and I want to say that I almost just didn't do this conversation. That's not the same thought process of not doing the show, by the way. Just I almost didn't do this conversation, so I want to preface it by saying I inadvertently engaged in a right-wing thought experiment. I'm going to entertain some element of that now because I'm not 100% certain that there's not a kernel of truth to it. But don't engage in right-wing thought experimentation. Just like don't lose your mind and be mean to your wife uh, over things that are not their fault. I said partner. I'm tried to anonymize it a little bit. I forgot. Um, uh, yeah, so the thought experiment was thus. Um, Basically, I do think that AI, absent this um, ownership of techno-fascists, basically, that I've described, would have a healthy effect on people. That's to say, um, if you lived in just a moderately to highly more realized socialistic world, and you could control for outside influence of elitism within that, which is almost impossible, but let's say there's some cities where that could occur today or in 5 years. Um, I think that as a socio-political phenomena, the autonomous and stronger AI chatbot would be good for people. It would allow them to say, um, well, what's the difference between that first generation of two kind of doofuses who don't have a mean bone in their body, having that kid who turns out to be John Wayne Gacy? Like, what's the difference between those two groups of people? Or more specifically, what's the difference between a person who is a little more resistant to, say, Project Mockingbird, fascistic brainwashing or programming, the extent to which you can literally be brainwashed shouldn't really be the issue there, because there's obviously a tremendous amount of brainwashing going on. Like, the planet's dying, nobody's behaving appropriately in the fascist West. I'd stop that. The people who are responsible for it and enforcing it institutionally. So you have to be pretty fucking sick to be on a dying planet, and neither the rulers or the people really do anything to stop that. So that's Project Mockingbird for you, right? So what's the difference between a person who is more resistant in present terms to Project Mockingbird or less resistant? Well, I couldn't exactly say, but it comes probably down to a couple things that we could just call like intelligence and neurotic, a lack of neuroticism. That's two things basically, which really, if I were doing justice to those, I wouldn't use either of those words, but describe that in like a book that described like 20 different things. But let's just say it's those two things. And I really don't see how people having this a strong AI chatbot in their life in any way, really, if it was a good chatbot, would allow for that situation to occur where you have the two dumbasses raising a bad person. Which, again, that's incredibly reductive, but we have to use this kind of shorthand, right? This is a 17-hour show. So the reason why I first entertained this, thinking, oh, it's pushing up to a writing thought experiment, and then dismissed it, and then kind of said, oh, maybe it's not, comes down to the same thing that I say on this show 100 times, which is that we have 5 years, we have 5 years before we are locked into a climate death spiral triggered by 2-degree overheating of this planet. We've already experienced 2-degree overheating in a few locales this year. That was not expected to happen for many years, that we would even experience that, but we've already experienced it. Let's say it was about 160 fucking degrees in some places like the desert of Iran. Hot enough that mammalian life could not survive there. You understand? That's a bad situation that we're in. And it's going to go in, after 5 years' time, if something dramatic doesn't happen, it's going to go from being a bad situation to increasingly a hell on earth situation. And nobody is acting, and everybody's just acting like that's, hey, there's a guy named Joe Biden who's my friend. I have people on fucking Facebook who say they are anti-fascists, anti-imperialists and anti-capitalists, who, this guy Joe Biden, who it made more oil leases and cut environmental regulation and did 100 other things. It failed to do 1,000 other things, um, most namely stopping the military-industrial complex, doing something like abolishing the CIA or cutting the military-industrial complex budget. Those two things could say, maybe stop this in 5 years, absent of destroying the U.S., which is really what must happen, destroying the U.S., dismantling the U.S. federal government. I have people who call themselves in my fucking ear, pissing in my fucking ear like an idiot, people who call themselves anti-capitalists, telling me that their good friend Joe Biden, who's signed more oil leases and such, um, um, is not a part of the problem. It's not somebody, so this planet's dying, right? So that's down to like 30,000 mostly white ruling global elites, predominantly representing the U.S. fascist ruling elites. Okay? In this framework, this most likely path that we're on, wherein humankind is locked into a climate apocalypse, all those people die anyway. All of those 30,000 people die anyway. Maybe one of them lasts an extra year in a bunker somewhere. But they all fucking die. The only people who are not likely to die, least likely to die, let's say not likely to die, are people like people living in a jungle in Papua New Guinea, who will be above the fray of being either blamed for or being drawn into a conflict there. Let's just say primitive. This probably happened in history before. That there have been bad things that have happened, maybe human caused, but people living in a particular locale, primitive hunter-gatherers, were the sole survivors. This probably happened. We know kind of that this has happened because there was a point where there had been a larger number of humans, and then there was only like 400 humans left. So we can say to some degree, and some variation of that's happened, and it could have happened a dozen times for all we know. So those people, literally just a guy and his wife who were gathering and hunting, maybe more likely to survive the next 40 years than, say, the billionaire who builds a bunker and thinks that they're going to rise above that. So that's how bad. That's how bad that situation is. So the 5-year plan of getting rid of capitalism, which nobody really has a plan for, and so everyone has embraced F, is the reason why you wouldn't say, "Oh, this AI thing that I said is a good thought experiment," because you couldn't even get everyone with that AI nanny, the good AI nanny, within the time frame before 3 billion of Earth's people were already dead. All right, enough ranting. I'll read something. This is a piece. It wasn't edited as much as I'd like, but I think it's all right. Activism for an AI-run, centrally planned economy. Practical guidance for advocates under cybernetic socialism and/or the proposed United Earth Directorate. This essay intends to offer practical guide for activists committing to advocating for and building an AI-run, centrally planned economy under the United Earth Directorate. Or whatever the thing is, you're smarter than Ben Zion, right? Ben Zion shouldn't be doing the technocommunism conversation, right? There was a time when I went vegan when I was young. I was 15 years old or something, and I became a communist when I was about that age. But then I embraced a kind of Western individualistic nihilism unwittingly or somewhat wittingly, and I stopped doing those things. I said, there's nothing I can do. What's the point of saving 4 or 5 cows between now and the time that the planet dies? The planet's going to be dead anyway. What's the point of becoming a communist when there's no communist movement? So for a lot of years, I was not intellectually engaged with the world in the way that I should have been, and I was just drinking a lot on the sly and being a dumbass. Um, um, and I've been on the wagon for 8 years, and in that time, there was a kind of resurgence of leftism, and so I got on the bandwagon there. But in that time, I also realized something else, which is um, that Ben Zion shouldn't be doing a technocommunism show because he's not that smart. But nobody's really that smart, right? People you think are smart are no smarter than almost anybody else, the dumbest person you know. Everybody's in about the same range. And when you factor in the fact that everybody is under the spell of something like Project Mockingbird, you know, there's no adults in the room. You're all evil, either too fucking stupid or too evil to do what needs to be done. And you're not uniting in the way that you need to be. Maybe that's changing. I shouldn't say that. Because I think that, you know, it's crazy. It's kind of crazy to me that the thing that seems to be the most a harbinger of a possible world revolution in the next few years is Jews becoming almost as evil as other white people over the course of the 20th century. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. So, you know, that's, again, incredibly reductive, right? Or who's really evil? Who can say what is real then? Okay, but yeah, white people are fucking evil. Yeah, that's, we can just use that shorthand again and just say that that's the case. And Jews were maybe like 20% less evil, you know, and people have written tons of books about this, like, you know, there's a Confederate named Judah P. Benjamin. There's famous slavers who were Jewish. People have written tons of books about this, right? Oh, Jews are always labor aristocracy. They were never, so to speak, they were never really very pro-communist. But really, yeah, they kind of were compared to other white people in the early 20th century. And then Zionism happened, and they became as evil as other white people. And somehow that now seems to be the most likely thing that's going to trigger a world revolution. It's not funny. Hopefully it happens. I don't see why any of that's funny. Either that world revolution happens or humanity goes extinct, right? It's hardly a thing to be cackling like a jackass about. So back to the AI. One tool powerful enough to really steer us to that necessary world revolution. It's not enough just to people to be angry, or even, I think, to be united in great numbers in the face of things as powerful as, say, the U.S. military-industrial complex or Project Mockingbird. We need to harness advanced computing as well and make advanced computing central to the messaging there, right? Because people need to really internalize and institutionalize the understanding that this is the most powerful tool that's ever existed, advanced computing of the 21st century, and it could be a tool for revolutionary ends instead of what it's being used now for, which is it's been captured by techno-fascists. This essay offers practical guidance for activists committed to advocating for an AI-run planned economy, drawing from contemporary online movements and historical examples of justice. The guidance covers key aspects such as crafting vision and strategy, understanding constituencies, messaging, leveraging digital tools, designing sustainable campaigns, sustaining engagement, maintaining secure foundations, And synthesizing these insights, activists can effectively contribute to the realization of this vision. This is not as fun for me to write as other things because it's just kind of synthesizing general advice for activists in this and kind of slapping this label of technocommunism on it. But it kind of still needs to be done. Right? Um, um, in this era characterized by escalating polarization and digital connectivity, the call for political movements advocating transformative change has become increasingly urgent. We have 5 years. And this essay aims to provide practical guidance for activists committed to the cause of establishing an AI-run, centrally planned economy, specifically under the aegis of something like the United Earth Directorate or a similar governance structure. Um, Again, I should say the United Earth Directorate is a little bit of a bad name for it, only in this one sense that you should be working to build socialism in one country, the country where you live. If you live in the fascist West, maybe like the heart of the imperial core, um, you might consider moving to another country and using your resources to build it there, because probably the only thing that's really going to stop the United States military-industrial complex is brute force. But there might be other locales where that's not the case. Um, Crafting vision and strategy. To initiate meaningful change, activists must first craft a compelling vision and strategic direction. Leveraging advanced open source tools. That's the center of a lot of this writing that I've done on the Techno-Communist Project. Has been focusing on using things like Mistral or Llama 2 or Llama 3, which might come out. We've used Llama 2 quite a lot, and I'm curious to use this Llama 3, which Mr. Zuckerberg claims is artificially generally intelligent. I really doubt that it will be to my satisfaction, but the fact that he would even say a thing like that, not assuming that he's going to be, it's just an elaborate practical joke because he's dying or something, would make me think that it might be pushing up to it enough that it could be the basis for something like the United Earth Directorate. As I said, just as we could pursue techno-communism in one country over a world revolution, we could begin to build a network of hyper-connected personalities operating in a particular kind of way. And I think that the best way to do that is to build a super intelligent hive mind collective. And I think the best way to do that is for people to quickly embrace the idea of digital assistantship, particularly in service to techno-communism, and having these digital proxies, digital twins, digital doppelgangers, beginning to behave in a more structured and formalized way towards governance and activism first, and governance ultimately. If you worked in policy clubs, you know that they're not always just book clubs or conversation places or clearinghouses for agitation propaganda. Sometimes they are actually doing things to that would mirror the activity of governments, or doing other things along this line. I don't want to start to use reformist language, but so that the again, it bears repeating that you will be able to download something this year that could be the basis for a worldwide, effectively decentralized governance structure, say the following year, theoretically. And that's what you should do, not because decentralization needs to happen in 2 years. Decentralization is the last thing that needs to happen in 2 years, because if you focus on the decentralization, what you're doing is playing into the hands of the dictatorship of the proletariat that exists, dictatorship of capital, the techno-fascist and corporate-fascist dictatorship that exists throughout The West, run by its evil ringleader, the United States. You're playing into the hands if you focus on decentralizing because you need to build something stronger than that, not more decentralized than that. The fact that this strategy that I'm suggesting is decentralized is only because that's a way in which you can begin to leverage a mass movement. Um, it's not the decentralization itself. Uh, you know, so in just a few months ago, a country, China, as a country with a realistically socialist constitution, has now existed longer than the Soviet Union, another country with a socialist constitution. Just so China, communist China is now older than the USSR, communist USSR ever was, as of 2023. So that it begs the question then, where did China succeed where the USSR failed? Well, the USSR kind of took a bullet in the form of being drawn into the Cold War and then allowing itself to be sabotaged by sleeper agents or arguably sleeper agents, people like Khrushchev and Gorbachev and folks in between there. But being drawn into this fake so-called Cold War, which so basically, the United States was nuked a country in 1945. In case you weren't aware, one of the most horrific things that any person has ever done was done by a U.S. president who replaced an anti-nuclear war president under suspicious circumstances, let's say, and the United States wanted to keep nuking other countries, right? Like it had plans to nuke 6 different countries, and it begged countries. It went to France and was like, please nuke China. If we nuke China, people will be like, oh, it's the nuclear serial killer of the United States. All they care about is fucking nuking people, which is true, and is true, effectively. But they didn't want to trigger a world revolution by being that evil. Um, uh, so um, uh, the only thing that kind of stopped them was other countries having nukes at that moment. Not a really big fan of that kind of argument, but it was true at that moment in 1950, say. Um, and so China didn't do that. But another thing that China had is being big, having a big population. Another thing that China had was taking also in the same logic of not doing that, of not being drawn into stupid stuff that would get them killed, so to speak, governmentally, and literally, was also kind of like engaging in something along the lines of the economic warfare that the U.S. is engaging in, although not in a pure evil way. The U.S. created things like the UN. There was something called before that was arranged on slightly more socialistic principles for the time. That was abandoned in favor of the UN, which could be more organized by the fascist West. Even worse offenders like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, World Economic Forum, all of these things of economic neocolonialism. And what does all of that amount to? Those things, it amounts to basically the fascist West cheating at monopoly in other countries to make it such that they can't have a real government, they can't have social programs, but most importantly, that the fascist West can extract a huge amount of resources in those countries. And that's not just down to the U.S., right? France has personally assassinated 60 African heads of state in your lifetime, in living memory, that is. So that's down to the fascist West, which has increasingly become led by the U.S., but is not only the U.S. by any stretch of the imagination. so China is was able to not do the evil part of that, but able to get some kind of thumb screws in the U.S. By buying things and by playing a certain kind of game like that without doing stuff that just designed to kill people, obviously, like the actions of the World Bank and etc. are. So getting just the minimum amount of leverage so that they would not be nuked, so to speak. Um, um, so what does this have to do with technocommunism? Well, um, why you should not be a decentralizer, an anarchist, perish the thought, a libertarian, a laughable, an even more laughable, a similar person. You should not be those things, even though I was suggesting a decentralizing a stratagem on this program repeatedly, um, is, is basically because we have to build something that is orders of magnitude more robust than the fascist West in order for humanity to survive. And we have to do that in a short time. And that means basically super intelligence, something that is smarter and more powerful. It just turns just the present the faster fascist master manipulators, the folks like who are kind of responsible for this thing, kind of a coterie of folks around like the Dulles brothers and George Bush. We just the present day equivalents of folks like that. Um, the Lincolns and Ted Cruz's, and just list every beltway piece of shit. Um, um, the just make them look by comparison as just a bunch of dilettantes, a bunch of children messing around in the mud of no consequence. Strip them of power by building something greater. Neutralize the threat, not by killing them all, which is should be on the table, but just there's a guy who just went and shot Steve Scalise. All right, I would regard that as a revolution-minded person who shot Steve Scalise, but that did not, in fact, trigger a world revolution. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to then go and continue shooting other Steve Scalises. He stayed stopped. He's in jail now. And so the option then is to build the thing that is stronger than them. You can start shooting Steve Scalises. If you have an army, you can start shooting Steve Scalises, but not until that time. Right? And why am I talking about this in the same vein as talking about like just building a smart system that's could almost just be described as an NGO or something, right? Like that's a different shooting politicians is on equal footing with building a tech NGO. Well, do what works, right? You have 5 years before your descendants are just hamburger meat, right? Before everyone who lives or will live is a dead man walking. So you have 5 years. That includes the ruling elites, right? And because they maintain a system that is going to kill you and them, and because they would be dead in either scenario, there's no reason why you wouldn't kill them. No reason at all, except that you are also an evil person. Just a boot-licking dog pretending to be something else. So I'm a good person. I'm nonviolent. I'm gonna put that on my fucking tombstone. I helped kill the planet, but at least I was nonviolent. Like a volt. All right. Back to this. Crafting vision and strategy to initiate meaningful change. Activists must first craft a compelling vision and strategic direction. leveraging advanced open source tools enabling a generation of authentic visions aligned with the goals of the United Earth Directorate, identifying core grievances and setting ambitious goals like take over the world, lays the groundwork for transformative change. Consensus around values and continuous refinement of the vision ensures its relevance and resonance with stakeholders. Understanding your constituencies. Activists must deeply understand their target constituencies to effectively mobilize support. Utilizing available tools facilitates the identification and likely supporter segments and discerning nuances within these segments, soliciting feedback from supporters and regularly reassessing target constituencies ensures alignment with evolving needs and priorities. Effective messaging is essential for engaging and inspiring supporters. Crafting clear and compelling messages communicates the essence of the movement while incorporating feedback, ensuring ongoing enhancement and resonance with the audience. Leveraging digital data and connectivity. In a digitally connected world, activists can harness the power of technology to mobilize supporters and coordinate campaigns, utilizing available tools, facilitating the capture of email signups, integration of digital platforms, and crafting of effective communication strategies, monitoring metrics and rejuvenating efforts based on data and analytics, enable continuous improvement and adaptability, designing sustainable events and campaigns. Sustainable engagement requires design of meaningful events and campaigns that resonate with supporters, establishing recurring days of action, organizing signature events, and strategically confronting adversaries amplify the impact of the movement, creating contribution pipelines and balancing digital and in-person engagement, ensure broad participation and sustain momentum. We need to sustain that momentum or we're going to die. Sustaining engagement over time to maintain momentum. Activists must nurture community relationships and support networks, offering pastoral care, facilitating collaborating visioning sessions, and cultivating mid-level leadership, foster a sense of belonging and ownership within the movement, promoting work-life balance, ensures sustained engagement from committed activists to try to take care of each other. It's a hell out there. Maintaining secure foundations during growth. As the movement grows, maintain a secure foundation becomes paramount. Establishing robust security measures, drafting organizational policies, and implementing protocols safeguard the integrity of the movement. Mitigating risks associated with growth ensure the movement's sustainability and effectiveness. In conclusion, this essay provides some practical guidance for activists dedicated to advocating for an AI-run centrally planned economy under something like the United Earth Directorate or technocommunism in one country. By synthesizing insights from contemporary movements and historical examples, activists can navigate the complexities of growth of grassroots mobilization, engage effectively with stakeholders, and contribute meaningfully to the realization of this visionary goal. Through vision, strategy, empathy, and collaborative engagement, activists can catalyze transformative change and shape the future of governance in the digital age. And I want to say again, you have what it takes to build superintelligence. It's not too late to set aside those nationalistic follies of the past, those elitist things that you are starting to dawn on you or holding you back from doing what needs to be done. The false pacifism that I described, which is in fact worse violence than that of any revolutionary. I'm not the person who should be leading this giant. I've been a fucking drunken idiot most of my life. And I couldn't, you can look at the stuff I wrote just a few years ago before I had the help of a digital assistant. Didn't make any fucking sense. Even when I started to think more seriously about this stuff, just in recent months, I think the quality of my writing has gotten better because it's not my writing. There's more collaboration in this super intelligent sense. And increasingly that will be the case as more and more of you uh, wake up to this necessity, begin to use stronger and stronger AI tools, um, and um, most importantly, perhaps not only just waking up to that, but um, and recognizing the exigency, but as I said, recognizing that you might think you're pretty smart. You're not as smart as you think you are. Nobody's really any smarter than anybody else. We're all just a bunch of gnats crawling around on a piece of bark relative to what we could become, super intelligent entities, and we're about to pick this bark clean and render it unlivable. If we don't do that, um, um, and so, you know, um, technocommunism or bust.